Maggie Toulouse Oliver, and she's joining Val. So, Val, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, it's our third installment of Vocal with Val this week. So we took about a month's hiatus and did some other important stuff, but now we hit the ground running, and we had a lot of guests this week. And today we have an old friend of mine. I'm very happy to welcome New Mexico Secretary of State Maggie Toulouse Oliver. Welcome, Maggie.
Thanks, Val. Happy to be here with you.
Well, we just celebrated Mother's Day, and I know you're a mom, so can you tell us a little bit about your kids and your little family there?
Yeah. So I have two sons. I like to say I have two only children because I have a 24-year-old son and a 12-year-old son. And my older son, Christian Toulouse, I had him at the ripe old age of 21. I was in college and had him and continued to work my way through college. And I kind of say sometimes that he and I both kind of grew up together. And he's a wonderful young man. He's he's following the path of becoming a chef. And so he cooks at Savoy Restaurant in Albuquerque. If anybody gets up there and goes to dinner, my son Christian is one of the chef staff there. And then my little boy Max Oliver is just a fantastic kiddo, goes to school here in Santa Fe. He's an aspiring artist, and he is a ski racer. So we spend a lot of time up in Taos during the winter because he trains every weekend in ski racing. And so I've learned how to I'm a very, sort of intermediate skier. I enjoy the Irish coffee at the end of the day more than the skiing itself, but I've learned how to be a ski mom with him. So that's been fun.
And the only experience I have in skiing is the fireplace at the lodge. So
yeah, that's the best part.
Never even put them on. So congratulations to your kids. My daughter graduating high school this year. She thought of pursuing a career in cooking, in baking. She's an aspiring artist herself. So we have a little bit in common there, Maggie. And I think, though, she's chosen to go to New Mexico State University and try to become a teacher. She wants to do some early childhood education and see if she can work her way up to high school, purposely skipping middle school because she says, Dad, those kids are crazy. I don't want nothing to do with middle school kids. So
that's awesome, Val.
Again, big shout out to my daughter getting everything done and graduating. She did 7 years of school online with New Mexico Virtual Academy. She got to go to Paris doing that. And then she finished up with Pecos Connections Academy. So online schooling does work in New Mexico. There's quite a few students doing that. And speaking of education, you're a graduate of New Mexico, UNM, right? A Lobo.
Yeah, I'm a Lobo. That's right. Yeah, it took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree because I was a single mom, or a mom and then a single mom, while I was getting my undergraduate degree. And my undergrad's in political science and Spanish, dual major. And then I went right away into my master's degree in political science. And I actually was planning to be a professor to get my PhD. And the 2004 election was really, there's just so much going on in the country at that time. I didn't think I could stay in the ivory tower, so to speak. So I left and, eventually became county clerk and, fast forward to today. But get this, Val, a couple years ago, I decided to go back and finish my PhD. So I'm doing that at the same time as my current job. And it's going to take a while, because I have to devote my focus to the job, but I'm chipping away at the PhD and maybe one day I'll be finished with that too. So that's my educational background.
well, I'm very proud of you for that. Talk about somebody that found their niche in life, political science, and the route you've taken. you've not only been an elected official winning as a county clerk in Bernalillo County, was it?
That's right. Hmm.
And we served at the same time when I was county assessor here in Socorro.
That's right.
You were clerk there. I was the affiliate chair, so I remember seeing you even back then. But I say this a lot. The most important part isn't getting elected; it's what you do after. And your track record is really astonishing about what you actually get done. And let's talk a little bit about the Secretary of State's office, especially in the last 4 years since you've been in office. Elections has been a focus. We've been accused of cheating. There's been a lot of accusations of ballot stuffing and stuff going on. And you made it a point to make it easy for people to vote without getting discriminated against. But more importantly, you've made all the votes legitimate. Can we talk a little bit about some of the accomplishments you've had in the last couple of years?
Sure. And I think, you know, what you said is really right. I think it's really important to emphasize in New Mexico that what I like to say is we can walk and chew gum at the same time, meaning we can have access to the ballot box and also protect the accuracy and integrity of the vote. You know, you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So we do try really hard, and we've been working on continuing to expand that access, especially to our rural communities, our tribal communities, you know, places that don't always get the services that government provides, but at the same time, making sure those votes are accurately counted. One of the things I'm most proud of is that, you know, as you said, Val, a lot of folks are interested these days in, you know, how we count the votes and making sure that those totals are accurate. Well, we were thinking about that here in New Mexico way before the 2020 election. We went to all paper ballots in 2006. We started auditing our elections to make sure those machines were counting the votes accurately in 2008. We've been doing that since, you know, before it was cool, I guess. And we've done it consistently, and we've consistently shown that our elections are accurate. So I'm really proud of that. I'm glad you brought up that issue because a lot of people don't know that.
Well, and I think it's important for them too, because even this week, I was talking to some people, and they happen to be Republicans, and they mentioned that, well, we just don't want dead people voting anymore. And I brought up this back because I was involved in a little bit of the Trump attempt to invalidate our ballots. There was a case filed in Socorro about the ballots. So I was chairman of the Democratic Party, and a group of Republicans came in, and they were going to review some of the ballot boxes that they thought was corrupt. And we came in, and we were there for 4.5 hours. And I sat there and I watched and I talked very friendly because, you know, Socorro's small. And the only thing they could come up with was that during the course of the elections, from early voting till the final day, the color of the paper changed. And they asked about that. And the clerk simply said, well, we had some leftover paper that we started with, and we ordered new paper, and it just happened to be a little different color white.
Right.
Oh, okay. So that was it. You know, we were there for 4.5 hours, and that was the only thing they could find. They were turning, you know, looking at stuff. So I was very pleased with our county clerk here in Socorro. I know during the elections, you were very accessible to anybody that wanted to talk to you about what's going on, and that's the part I like about you know, after the elections, it's a matter of getting the work done.
Yeah.
You know, so let's talk a little bit then about what's happening right now. You know, I think I know Tuesday we started voting, and I know that because I go at 7:30. The doors open at 8, and I'm typically the first one in Socorro County to vote. And I was again this year, and the process was seamless, very, very smooth. And but there were some changes, I think, on how we vote. Can we register to vote right now? Can I go and like an 18-year-old go to register and then vote immediately, or has anything changed concerning that?
Yeah, that's a good question and a good point because, as you know, Val, for decades in New Mexico, we have a deadline 28 days before Election Day, right? You have to be registered to vote if you want to participate. And over the last couple of years, we have been implementing new law. So voters have been allowed to conduct what's called same-day registration at early voting at the clerk's office. So we've been doing that for the last 2 years. And now starting this year, same-day registration will be available at every polling location in the state on Election Day. And so what that means to your question is if either you're not already registered to vote, or if you've moved, if you need to change your address, right? Because you were originally registered in Albuquerque and now you're down in Las Cruces going to New Mexico State, or vice versa. You can go to the polling location to either the county clerk's office at early voting sites where it's offered, or on Election Day, and do that voter registration. You do need to bring certain types of ID with you. You can find all that information on our website at the Secretary of State's website, or on your voter information portal at nmvote.org. But long story short, we don't, 28 days before Election Day is no longer the last chance to register to vote. But just keep in mind, if you're going to do same day registration, you do have to go in person. Got to go to your clerk's office or to an Election Day polling place. So you have to have your documentation, and you'll register and vote right there at the same time.
Yeah. And most of that documentation is like proof of your address, like a bill for utilities or something like that, correct?
Yeah, exactly. We're not asking you to, go get a birth certificate or something, nothing that major. But yeah, exactly right. Prove where you live. That's all.
So then in the primaries, and this is kind of interesting, but I know in the past, when I was asking people to register to vote and to consider putting a Republican or Democrat and declaring their party, and the reason why I would do that is I would tell them this gives you the opportunity to vote in the primary.
Right.
Because if you're a declined state or if you're independent, then you don't get to vote in the primary election, correct?
Well, that's right. We have as you know, Val, what's called a closed primary system. So, folks, you can only vote in the primary if you're registered with a major party, Republican, Democratic, or Libertarian. But I think where you're going with this question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is now with same-day voter registration, if you are not already registered with a major party, in other words, right now, today, if you're a declined state, independent, Green Party, what have you, you can go to the polling place with same-day registration and change your party registration to pick a ballot to a major party ballot and vote in the primary, and then change back if you want to do that later. So you can participate now if you choose to do that.
And the interesting thing is that they would tell me, but I might not want to vote Democrat in the general. Well, that's beside the point. You don't have to vote for your party. You could be you could be a registered Democrat and vote for a Republican, or vice versa.
That's totally true.
Yeah. So that was confusing a lot of times, I think, in the past.
I agree.
So then, let's see. I have about 3 or 4 more minutes. Real quickly. Because we have some new people that are running for office, and some of those laws have changed, and I know you've worked very, very hard in cleaning up your database concerning all these old elected officials that had forgotten to turn in reports and stuff. Let's talk a little bit about what it takes to become an elected official. It's a little bit different statewide versus countywide. Is that not true?
Yeah, state, at the state level to become a candidate, right? A lot more hoops to jump through. Usually a certain number of signatures have to be collected. For us that run statewide and federally, we have to go through the convention process. County officials typically, you go, and I remember I did this myself as you did, Val, back in our county days. Just walk up on filing day, pay your $50, and you're on the ballot. But I think we were talking before the call today about what are these reporting requirements in terms of campaign finance, and we both. In New Mexico, we are trying really hard in my office to automate the process and make it as easy as possible for people to comply. Because at the end of the day, when people are filing campaign finance forms and reporting, who's given them money for their campaign and how they've spent it, my goal as Secretary of State is just to make sure people have the information, that the public can see that, where is that money coming from? How's it being spent? So I'm not necessarily trying to make it harder for people to do that, right? I want to encourage it and facilitate it. But it is really important that people file those reports, and we do everything we can. We send notices. We have staff on hand to help people with any problems they may have, technical, whatever. If people, if somebody comes down and you has to go to the hospital in your family, we'll help you. We'll work with you to get that done. But at the end of the day, there can be some severe penalties if that gets ignored too. So it is a really big responsibility, but we will do everything we can in our office to help you with that. And I think that's the thing that I want to emphasize, is that we work really hard to help folks make sure they get that information reported.
And things that need to be reported are like if you buy radio ads, or if you go and buy, $500 worth of signs or T-shirts or whatever that advertises for your campaign. But the other thing I think that needs to be reported is in-kind donations. Yes. Like if somebody else says, I made you these 50 signs.
Right. Exactly.
They need to report that as well as a contribution, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Because whether someone gave you money or somebody gave you, something that you're using that is of value, that is a donation, and the statute defines it that way. So you're absolutely right, Val. Everything needs to be reported, and again, it's for the good of the public to know, who is supporting candidates and how that money is being spent.
And then, are there supposed to be disclaimers on the product, like cards or signs that says "paid for by so and so"?
Yeah, anything that is big enough to have a disclaimer readable on it definitely needs a disclaimer. So to your point, my campaign committee is called Friends of Maggie. So everything that we print says, paid for by Friends of Maggie. But if it's really small, like a pin or a button, or if it's like a bumper sticker where nobody's going to be able to read it, you don't have to put a disclaimer on those things. Just anything that it's practical to put a disclaimer on that it can be read is the key.
And I think it's important to point out that this isn't nitpicking. This isn't being tough. In this new world where we have so many of these PACs out there, political action committees that try to influence races, we got to know what's coming from the candidate, what's coming from the PACs, so that the public can be aware of what messaging and where it's coming from, correct?
No, that's exactly right. And as I was saying, that's the whole goal, right? I know not every voter in the state cares about or wants to know every little thing about who's paying for what in terms of getting folks elected. I understand that, but there are citizens out there who do want to know that information. There are a lot of people for whom knowing who is donating to a campaign and how that candidate is spending their money, there are people for whom that information is going to help them decide how they want to vote in an election. And so again, I feel like my job as Secretary of State is to really encourage compliance with those requirements so we have that transparency, so voters can find that information out. That is my job at the end of the day, is to make that information available to them and to work with candidates to make sure that they can get that information posted in public.
And that's what I try to tell people of Socorro, to give them that information. So I think we've used up most of our day today. Today's talk with the Secretary of State was to kind of go over the election process. We are currently in the primary season. So if you didn't know that, you can go to the courthouse or any voting location and vote right now. Vote by mail is available, correct, Maggie?
Absolutely. And if you need information on where, when, and how to cast your ballot, if you want to look at your sample ballot, if you want to apply for an absentee ballot, just please visit nmvote.org. That is the main site that has all of the voter information you need. And I just want to really encourage folks to use that site as much as they need to for any voter information.
And I want to thank you for that site, because it's very easy to navigate. You can find things you need to find wherever the locations are nearest you. And if I live in Socorro and I want to vote in Magdalena or Aloma, those ballots are available to me because they're in the same county, correct, Maggie? So
that's exactly right.
And things have been very easy. So hopefully in the near future we can get together, talk to you about your campaign, and not the Secretary of State's office. And we'll do that in the near future. I hope maybe after the primaries, and go through some of the reasons why you're running again. So we'll do that later. I'll let you go. I want to thank Maggie Toulouse Oliver, the New Mexico Secretary of State, for visiting with me, vocal with Val, and with Reese, and hope to see you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Val. I'll be down there soon, and yes, I will definitely come back. Happy to be part of the show.
Well, thank you, Maggie. I hope you drop by Rio Grande Valley Radio Studio when you're here in town, and we really appreciate your visit, talking about the voter portal and all the things important to our voters today. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great one.
You too.
All right, good.
Recording stopped.
All right, Val. Well, that takes us back over to you and I here at the studio, and I think that was a good interview, and I really thank you for conducting it. I think it was real effective, and the financing is such an important part. I mean, with rural New Mexico and a lot of the poverty and issues that we have here, it's really important to see what money is actually influencing our local politics, and I think Maggie does a great job with, like you said, with her website, as you said, letting us know some of those issues and report things. So. Mm-hmm. I think it was a good interview. Thank you.
And I think another thing that I would try to encourage, and we touched on it a little bit during the interview, is that if you're not attached to one of the parties,
right,
and you might have a good reason not to do that, but in order to participate in the primary elections, you should know kind of what your heart feels, what your conscience feels, and then attach to the party that way. That way, if there's a candidate you really like in the primary elections and they're opposed, well, you can help that candidate at least by your vote if you're registered for that party. So I would encourage people. I know there's probably close to 3,000 voters in Socorro County that are declined to state or independent, and they might have a reason valid to be that, but let's participate as much as you can and back those candidates that you want to back.
Yeah, and I think you stated a really good thing there about knowing what your for what your values are.
Sure.
And knowing what you're going into, to look for. And I think, like it says, the Maggie does a really good job of putting that information and having that up there and using your research. But yeah, become informed, know where your heart is, know where your conscience is, and then look for the candidate that matches those values. Sure. But you've got to be registered to vote.
And then the other thing, we talked about how easy it is to become a candidate. If you're going to run for county commission, treasurer, clerk, sheriff, basically all you do is go on filing day with your $50 and you can become a candidate. If you want to run for Then you got to go collect signatures and present signatures, and you got to collect the signatures of the party you're affiliated with. So it's a little bit more of a process, but she did touch a little bit on how that is. And then finally, the reporting of your finances so that people will know what you're doing, how you're doing, who contributed to your campaign. I think that adds to the transparency of your campaign.
Well, and the transparency is so important because money influences so much of our elections, and being able to see who's influencing that elections, and again, does it align with your values and your conscience? Like it says, really having those things in mind, because money can get us a lot of media, a lot of airtime, and things like that. But really have to look at the, I don't know, I'm really cautious about big money influencing things these days in elections,
Sure.
And that's why what we try to do here is open up media and access to our state and local officials so that people can get to know them in a fairly affordable way, since we both volunteer.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Val. It's been a good session this morning. We've made some improvements with the lighting here at the studio. I want to thank you for that, Val. And folks, thanks for listening in. I really appreciate it. We're going to be playing this audio recording of our interview with Maggie Toulouse Oliver, New Mexico Secretary of State, back on Rio Grande Valley Radio's radio program tonight at 6:30 p.m. So if you want to sit back and listen to the interview, you can join us on RioGrandeValleyRadio.com, and you can listen to that interview. We'll leave it up on our Facebook post so you can listen at your convenience. And we hope you'll enjoy us and ask us any questions if you have. And we've got another interview scheduled for Monday. Is that what I understand, Val?
Monday with Tara Jaramillo running for state representative.
Fantastic. Is she coming in the studio or remote?
I'll get all that information to you as soon as I get a chance to talk to her. She's
no pressure.
All right.
No pressure. All right, Val. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. You've been listening to Vocal with Val on Rio Grande Valley Radio right here